I wish to discuss today with you all something on interdisciplinary approach to conflict resolution. So what is an interdisciplinary approach in conflict resolution? Just a minute. I want to minimize the screen, which is on video. How do I? Yes. So dear friends, I wish this, although this presentation is organized into different steps. First of all, I will try to explain what is interdisciplinary approach, and then conflict and resolution, and then I will explore 3 domains to understand how conflict resolution mechanism is analyzed and understood in these 3 domains, especially in natural resource management, urban planning, and transdisciplinary discourse. And then I will try to look at all these 3 it is contributing to conflict resolution mechanism. An interdisciplinary approach draws insight from several disciplines to redefine problems outside of normal boundaries and reach solutions based on a new understanding of complex situations. If you want to understand what is interdisciplinary in a ontological and epistemological sense, you can refer to the scientific structure revolution that is explained by Thomas Kuhn, and how a paradigm shift is happening in disciplines. Interdisciplinary approach is an important approach these days. You will see this is mentioned in almost all the documents of the government, or even new education policy, etc., in interchangeably, interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary, etc. Now, why this approach is important is because it fosters the acquisition of foundational knowledge, promotes integration of ideas from multiple disciplines, and provides insight on how to apply knowledge which advance a person's understanding of how to learn and understand an issue. So interdisciplinary approach gives a learner wider varieties of perspectives to understand an emerging complex issue. Now, what are the skills and capacities that enhance the learner if one approach a particular discipline or a particular issue from an interdisciplinary perspective? The learner is able to recognize the bias, and he or she will be able to overcome a tendency to maintain preconceived notions. See, so that the learner can overcome. For example, now you people were discussing about identity issues, etc. Second is because it integrates conflicting insights from alternative disciplines, how to approach an emerging problem or an issue. Interdisciplinary approach enables the learner to tolerate ambiguity. Tolerance is a very, very demanding term these days, because it helps to understand why conflicts commonly arise over the causes and consequences of an issue, and the ideal way for policy to address the issue under examination. Interdisciplinary approach also acknowledge and appreciate ethical concerns. Ethical concerns means which is mostly dealt with what is right, what is wrong, what is good and bad, and under the ambit of the provision of justice. Now, when we look at interdisciplinary approach in conflict and resolution, how do we understand conflict? Already you might have heard a lot about conflict for the last incompatibility of interest, values, etc. Referred in a number of ways, including dispute, clash of interest, competing interests, or simply a problem, etc. But one thing we have to understand is that the connotations of conflict, the nomenclature of conflict and its meaning get changed over the period of time. For example, conflict, nobody wants it. It has got a negative connotation. It is an undesirable phenomenon in the society. Because every conflict between two parties immediately can bring either pain or pleasure. But academic analysis states that conflict also is desirable in medium and long-term sense, because it can bring social change in the society. It helps conflicting party to realize what they have undergone. And in the long-term sense, conflict is transformative. For example, why Europe is developed today? Because centuries after centuries, they had revolutions, wars, conflicts, etc. So conflict has brought that society into the current development if you look at in a long-term perspective. If you look at resolution, conflict resolution, it is also referred in different ways. For example, conflict prevention, mitigation, management, transformation, consensus building, cooperation, reconciliation, and collaboration, etc. There are also termed, these are all termed as mechanisms. These are conflict mechanisms. Many of the times in our seminars and workshops, etc., people keep on speaking about conflict resolution mechanisms. And conflict resolution is understood as a dynamic, iterative process where different stakeholders initiate attempts to solve the conflict formally and informally in search of a better solutions. In the conventional understanding, conflict resolution mostly happens in a society through courts, and there are mediators known as the arbitrators, adjudicators, or third parties, etc. But conflict resolution today has broadened its understanding. It has taken new dimensions, new nature, etc., beyond courts and mediators. For example, social contract theory, it's a great conflict resolution mechanism. Westphalian Treaty, it's a great conflict resolution mechanism. The new education policy, which is envisioned or released recently, is also trying to address many conflicts that are existing in our society. Now, when you look at conflict resolution as a discipline, conflict resolution as a discipline is a very new in its origin and evolution. For example, if you look at this article, this Shaheen Shaukat Dar, he has recently written in 2007 in a very elaborative way how conflict resolution or the peace and conflict studies evolved into a discipline. For example, you look at these four phases: evolutionary phase, post-evolutionary phase, institutional developments, contemporary phase, and post-Cold War era, etc. But we also need to understand conflict resolutions is embedded in a society, in a culture, in a system, etc., from immemorial time. It is an implicit mechanism, exists everywhere. But we need to understand how these mechanisms operate and functions in different domains and disciplines. So for the benefit of these presentations, I have narrowed down 3 domains. One is natural resource management, second is transdisciplinary research, and the third one is urban planning studies. The theme of conflict resolution has been long used in natural resource management as an adaptive co-management that includes adaptive management, collaborative management, and participatory resource management. Within natural resource management, there is also common pool resource research. And within the social ecology, social ecology means the study of relationship between people and their environment. In common pool resource research, conflict resolution is addressed through deliberation, negotiation, dialogue, and joint learning, which is facilitated by innovative institutional arrangements. In the social ecology, resilience means you can take your original positions or come back to the equilibrium. Conflicts are treated through a social network, knowledge sharing, and social learning. So together with the adaptive co-management, more detailed and in-depth studies of conflicts and their resolutions are also found within human ecology. For the youngsters, human ecology means, and it is an interdisciplinary and a transdisciplinary study of the relationship between humans and their natural, social, and built environments. So in these literatures, conflict resolution is often framed in terms of participation, cooperation, collaboration, dialogue, and conflict transformation. Now, what is joint learning and knowledge integration meant by natural resource management in the natural resource management domain? The conflict resolution approaches discussed within the studies of natural resource management are consensus and compromise oriented, and see knowledge sharing and integration through a joint learning as a necessary precondition to form a common understanding or interpretations of a problem at hand. The framing of knowledge integration through social, joint, and collaborative learning prevails with the exception of reframing approach. So joint learning is seen as a central for better understanding the positions and perceptions of participating actors. Now, the most important factor in this both joint learning and knowledge integration is the cognitive process. How we understand knowledge, the cognitive process. In NRM, the knowledge integration is conceptualized through learning in the framing, reframing approach, which may be seen as a process of knowledge integration itself. Knowledge production and integration are seen as part of cognitive process of understanding, interpreting, and making sense of the problem at hand. Now, how does this process take place in natural resource management? The process component of knowledge integration related to individual and group learning is not much analyzed in the NRM domain. Rather, it is implicitly present in the general process of dialogue, negotiation, learning, collaboration, and participation. Joint formulation of alternative resources, resource management plans often constitute the outcome component of knowledge integration in NRM. Successful horizontal and vertical integration of competing knowledge. There are so many knowledge systems available. For example, scientific. If you look at the discourses between scientific or the allopathy and Ayurveda and many other things in India, Unani, etc. There are a lot of discussion between which is scientific, managerial, local ecological, all these kind of knowledges in a form of jointly produced alternative management plans formulated in the process of collective negotiations in the natural resource management domain. There are taxonomies, there are typologies of knowledge, which already I have explained. They are local knowledge or scientific knowledge or managerial or administrative, are further categorized as formal or informal, local ecological or local social knowledge. Informal knowledge is often integrated in formal knowledge, articulated through written documents, norms, and procedures. We are rarely specify what is meant by knowledge or different knowledge types. The focus is rather on the instrumental process that stimulate or support knowledge use and integration on different levels of decision making. So how do we understand conflict resolution in transdisciplinary research? In transdisciplinary research, not only discussion regarding knowledge integration, but also focus on process, and more recently on how power relations influence the ability to integrate different perspectives into transdisciplinary research. They include conceptual models for collaboration, knowledge typologies, mutual learning process, and participatory features and power. Knowledge integration in the transdisciplinary discourse in the context of conflict resolution in this presentation is not just about knowledge outcomes. It is about knowledge creating process, about how knowledge exchange, sharing, and integration occur through different types of participation, cooperation, and collaboration. So a great deal of attention has been put on designing conceptual models for collaboration that can create the premises for knowledge exchange and learning. So central issues for joint understandings and problem formulations include discussions regarding the significant amount of time needed to create the mutual trust. It's very important, mutual trust and commitment that underlies the creation of productive relationships. The main distinction of knowledge types is between scientific knowledge and practitioner-based expertise, or the so-called science policy interface. There are further distinctions based upon groups of actors, the functions of knowledge, and on knowledge systems or communities. Often within the science practice divide includes interdisciplinary knowledge integration among different disciplines and scientific domains like the natural and social sciences, and different types of professional or experience-based knowledge based on groups of actors such as bureaucrats, civil servants, business interests, or on experiential or lay knowledge, etc. Lay means common knowledge, common man's understanding. So the knowledge classification based on the types of analysis being undertaken, such as instrumental, normative, predictive, etc. in transdisciplinary research. Then focus on mutual learning process that includes how knowledge systems are constituted in different communities, collectivities, and epistemologies. It's very important. Now you people were discussing about Hindu, Muslims, etc. All have got different cultural background. All have got different understanding of their knowledge. I have not read Vedas or Upanishads. I have not read Qurans. How can I make judgments on these kind of epistemologies which create my cognitive process? That is what interdisciplinary enables you to understand what is your bias, which I have discussed in the introduction. So a much cited typology of knowledge where systems, target, and transformative knowledge are noted as the basic types of knowledge that are needed for transdisciplinary research for sustainability. So what is these systems? What are is mean by the target, transformative, etc. in transdisciplinary research? System knowledge refers to knowledge about the current state of a specific problem. In India, there is big problem, Hindu-Muslim, or minority versus majorities. So how do we get here? Where are we heading towards? These are the systemic problems. Target knowledge refers to desirable futures or goals. Do you want a secular country? Do you want a Hindu Rashtra? So where do we want it to go? This is a big issue. Goal. What is your goal? Then transformative knowledge refers to knowledge about how to transition to a special goal or future. How do we get there? Now, NEP, New Education Policy, has envisioned a lot of ideal things. How do we get there? It's a big question. So these knowledge types are seen to embody the specific challenges of sustainability regarding uncertainties, the contested nature of sustainability, and the practical and institutional contextual complexity related to reaching sustainability. So knowledge integration is also an approach with a focus on mutual learning process, as well as how this learning occurs within a group settings. I don't know whether you understand what is meaning of mutual learning process. We all are very judgmental and argumentative in Indian context. Are we learning each other? Are we trying to know each other? That is very important in knowledge integration. Dealing with the power differentials has also been an implicit topic within transdisciplinary through analyzing how participatory features enable different degrees of collaboration. You see, somebody was yesterday asking me a question that why there was no kind of resistance or response from minorities when Rama Janmabhoomi Puja was, this Ayodhya's Puja was taking place. So dealing with power differentials has also an implicit, it's very, you need to understand that it is very much understood in transdisciplinary research through analyzing how participatory features enable different degrees of collaboration. So more recent approaches criticize this transdisciplinary research for not adequately dealing with ingrained power differentials between participating groups, because participating groups, for example, in our society, there are different stratification that exist. General category, OBC, SC, ST, etc. So how do they interact each other? What is their, do they have any kind of asymmetrical power differentials? And how did they reach into these power differentials, etc. is a big question that we need to be analyzed by looking at the knowledge integration or the knowledge systems. Now, let us also look at how knowledge is used and in conflict knowledge use and conflict resolution in urban planning studies. Sorry. Conflicts are seen as a natural byproducts of the planning process, where conflicts of multiple differing interests and goals become manifest in urban planning studies. Formal planning procedures are themselves a tool for conflict resolution, which is achieved through both formal, example, between legal and policy based, and informal procedures that may differ in means and in or form. In urban collaborative planning, conflicts are addressed through different forms of consensus oriented collaborative efforts. Example, dialogues, discussions, formal discussions in public consultation within planning, and informal with various stakeholders and through forums, and then through participatory procedures, etc. So together with the conflict theme, the theme of knowledge use, knowledge contestation, and plurality of knowledge is also internal to collaborative planning. This is, many of us don't understand this because this is a big problem. The use of knowledge, the knowledge contestation, the plurality of knowledge is also internal to collaborative planning. So different forms of communication and participation, for example, collaborative dialogues, group negotiations, open stakeholder forums within collaborative planning serve as areas for integration of different knowledges. Critical planning scholars who criticize collaborative planning orientation towards consensus call for a more robust deliberation and institutionalization of inclusive participation in order to facilitate transformative learning, integration of knowledges. Transformative learning may expose power relations and when the scope of the value system emerge. So acknowledging the contribution and relevance of collaborative planning for general conflict resolution through collaborative procedures, one may find that very few studies explicitly focus on both the practices of knowledge integration and conflict resolution in urban planning studies. So most of the urban planning studies revolve around collecting or sharing information within the frames of communication rather than discussing different knowledge types and the process of their use. So joint knowledge production, co-creation and communication of the newly produced knowledge are important elements of planning process that may help finding new solutions, especially in conflict management. Integration of the three main knowledge types, as earlier we have distinguished, such as scientific, expert, managerial, or common man's knowledge, is of conflicts and the different issues and help to find common interests and reach consensual solutions. So let us now try to compare all these three things and look at from in an interdisciplinary approach perspective. In the natural resource management domain, more refined and defined knowledge types that go beyond general categories of local, scientific, managerial are rarely discussed in relation to conflict resolution. The focus is primarily on the outcome of participation and collaboration as the main approaches to resolving conflicts rather than on process and mechanisms. It's very important. The studies are mostly concerned with the instrumental part of conflict resolution. Example, collaborative and participatory tools with limited further analysis or evaluation of the process that happen within these tools. In urban planning studies, tend to focus on specific tools to facilitate integration, collaboration, communication of knowledge. They do not go in depth analysis or discussion of the mechanisms of integration or the roles that different knowledge types have in the process. Neither do the urban planning studies provide an in-depth analytical evaluation of the knowledge integration process in terms of its specific contribution to the planning and decision making. In contrast to natural resource management and urban planning studies, transdisciplinary research specifically is focused on the phases and mechanisms of knowledge integration with no specific focus on conflict resolution. This is very important to notice. So the studies and practices of knowledge use do not always explicitly aim to resolve conflicts. They have in common the goal of creating common joint understanding of the problem at hand. So this is a very crucial difference. Common understanding is regarded as one of the cornerstones and prerequisites for reaching a trade-off among the stakeholders. It serves as a basis for more adequate and informed decision making and eventually resolution of conflicts. Collaborative and participatory settings and tools that promote joint learning, joint knowledge production, and communication are the main tools used to facilitate integration of different knowledge types within all these three domains. So integration of different knowledge type is often pre-understood or implied through the general collaborative and participatory settings and through information exchange, often remain undiscussed or assumed behind participation or collaboration. This makes it difficult to see what role collaborative and participatory process that aim at knowledge integration actually play in conflict resolution. So the question of how knowledge is used and integrated in the resolution of conflicts in natural resource management and urban planning studies also remains undefined. So in as a overall, maybe we can say that more elaborated knowledge typologies that could be relevant for conflict resolution in natural resource management and urban planning studies are relatively less or very few. So while conflict studies in NRM and urban planning studies are somewhat less concerned with the mechanisms of knowledge integration or elaborated knowledge typologies, for transdisciplinary research offers in-depth analysis of and reflection on participatory and learning process, on process of knowledge integration and their goals and forms. So conflict studies within NRM and urban planning studies could therefore benefit from some of the approaches to knowledge integration developed within transdisciplinary research to refine the analysis of knowledge using different types of conflict resolution. So how give and take is taking place within these three domains is very important. So now let us come to the last session, interdisciplinary knowledge typology for the analysis of conflict resolution. Already we have come to different kinds of knowledge types that are existing in natural resource management. They are informal, formal, local, lay, scientific, administrative, managerial knowledge, etc. So knowledge based on functional characteristics and knowledge sources include process knowledge, predictive, normative, empirical, and experimental or experiential knowledge types, etc. Also in urban planning studies. There are also knowledge jointly co-produced by stakeholders in collaborative and participatory settings as an additional type of knowledge that can be traced in resolution process, especially in urban planning studies. So functional knowledge categories types include systems, target, and transformative knowledge, and they represent the specific challenges of sustainability regarding uncertainties, normativity, and institutional and contextual complexity, and it can be traced in practice routines, especially in documents and visions, etc. So combining typologies from different fields of these three domains show the different ways that knowledge can be conceptualized are positioned on different analytical levels in a broader context, formal and informal, in a institutional affiliations and mandates. It is in individual actors, planning professionals, decision makers, academics, and in a practice related process, planning and implementation of routines, decision making process, etc. So the level of context, actors, and practice are the analytical distinctions we will use to structure the analysis of complex conflicts and resolution practices. So the different levels of analysis found in natural resource management, transdisciplinary research, and urban planning make it possible to compare and categories. So when applied to conflict analysis, the practice level of the typology could serve as a starting point. The practice level is where different knowledge claims that different actors bring into conflicts can be traced, identified, and compared. Example, scientific, professional, local, in relation to practical, predictive, and process components of practice. For each practice related knowledge type, one can further identify the more specific knowledge types that actors bring into the discussion. Actor level types, because the basis for the claims made explicit on the practice level is different according to different actors involved. One can compare that the target goals from different actors as the analytical levels mirror the complexity of conflicts, and to some extent thus address the wickedness of the problem at hand. For example, I don't know, whenever there is a negotiation, people simply, you understand, so that there is a wickedness, because the parties that are engaging in conflict and negotiation also understand how much they can derive from some kind of dialogue and negotiation, etc. So three analytical levels also embody the theoretical approach that conflict resolution is about how context and actors play out in practice through different types of knowledge claims, in practices of conflict development, as well as in resolution. So positioning these knowledge typologies in terms of levels thus increases our ability to compare the diversity of knowledge conceptualization and better understand how they relate to the different levels of analysis. So there are limitations of these typologies also, knowledge taxonomies or limitations of knowledge typologies. For example, we need to understand how indigenous knowledge or local knowledge is understood by the society and or the common people, and how both indigenous and expert professionals engage in the knowledge making in the indigenous knowledge. So indigenous knowledge may be local, based on practice, observation, experience, but also professional, as it can be concentrated with the local experts. It can be about rules, procedures, and laws. It can also serve as a basis for decision making. For example, in case of small scale fisheries, biological conservation. Indigenous knowledge may also be professional. Expert, for example, I can tell you in my neighborhood there are Ayurvedic experts, and they have not done any kind of degrees or courses, etc. But they continue to practice it generation after generation. So allows looking at into not only from for informal but also from a formal knowledge perspective. In the case of indigenous knowledge, we recognize it is embedded in different knowledge system, which makes it difficult to place in a single knowledge type. This shows how complex the knowledge types, while problematic, can still be adequately positioned in multiple places in our typology, because there is an overlapping nature between kind of watertight stratification. That is what. So the objective is not to analyze the validity of the knowledge claims. Rather, it aims to help identify the dominant knowledge types articulated by stakeholders during the course of conflict development and resolution. The emphasis is on dominant knowledge types because different stakeholders hold multiple types of knowledge and employ them simultaneously. Nevertheless, knowledge typologies are helpful for identification of the dominant knowledge types articulated by stakeholders in conflict. Integrated can only be traced indirectly through the outcome component of knowledge integration. This may be seen, for instance, through the change in position of stakeholders that leads to a jointly accepted solution, which may be reflected in document policies, alternative management plans, etc. So the analysis and understanding of interdisciplinary knowledge typology could serve as a point of departure in mapping the knowledge types used in practices of conflict resolution. When identified, they may be followed further in horizontal collaborative participatory process and in vertical process of integration into decision making. When tested in practice, the typology must clearly be refined and specified according to the contextual needs, because process of conflict development, resolution, and knowledge use are complex social phenomena which require attention to the context where experiences and meanings are largely bound to time, people, and setting. This is very important. So, integrated understanding of these typologies might help to better analyze what knowledge is marginalized, excluded from, or underrepresented in participatory collaborative process. What implication this could have on the outcomes of participation and collaboration, and what implication this could have for long-term oriented conflict resolution and management. So the objective is to understand what knowledge refers to in the different examples and contexts, and how knowledge is and can be used in integrated manner to resolve the conflict. So let us now come the centrality of participatory and collaborative approaches that promote knowledge exchange and joint learning for conflict resolution is widely acknowledged. The focus was not on mechanisms and processes that constitute the notion of participation and collaboration of conflict resolution. The focus was more on how knowledge is seen, defined, and used in resolution process. So identification of some general trends and common practices of knowledge use that directly or indirectly facilitate conflict resolution. So interdisciplinary knowledge typology for conflict resolution serves as an attempt to integrate approaches from different fields, different disciplines. How conflict analysis and resolution may be enriched through developing more refined interdisciplinary tools for the analysis of knowledge use practices. This is very important to explore further. So by paying more attention to the question of what knowledge is referring to and how knowledge is used and integrated in resolution practice, more light may be shed on the possible shortcomings of the resolution process, which might in turn serve as a base to improve conflict resolution towards more lasting, long-term oriented, and therefore much sustainable solutions and planning. So dear friends, thank you so much. I don't know, these are little technical in terms of, because I teach at MPhil and PhD level, etc. So I usually use all these things in my discussions and debates. And so I thought that I will go a little bit of ontological and epistemological framework in understanding conflict resolution. So I hope if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer if I am able to. Otherwise,
thank you, Professor Paul. Do we have any questions? We have 10 minutes for question answers. Anyone who wants to ask a question, please raise your hands.
The gist of this simple discussion is this: we mostly focus on conflict mechanisms. We forget about how our knowledge is formed in our social settings. For example, now it's the most hot debate that you people were doing when I was joining was between on Hinduism and Islam, etc. I don't know how we make a lot of judgments even without understanding other religion, other culture, and how theologically they formed such kind of theories and principles, etc., in text and scriptures, etc. So this is a complex issue that we need to understand. That is what my what is called my effort, that knowledge formation is the most important, especially how we understand our social setting, the knowledge that is created and settings in our mind. It creates a lot of impact. So that is what. Any questions? Otherwise, I think it is a little complex.
Also ask.
Yeah. There, if you have questions, please ask.
You unmute her.
I think some of my students are there. They want
We
to.
have Sabiha, and then Dinesh wants to ask a question. So,
Okay, please.
Can you please go ahead?
Are they asking questions in chat or in?
No, they will ask by video call.
We have unmuted them so they can speak and ask you questions.
Okay.
Professor Paul, you can stop sharing the screen. So that
Just remove.
Sabiha, can you hear us? If Sabiha is taking time to come on, Dinesh, if you want to go ahead with your question.
Just remove your screen.
Stop sharing.
Stop sharing here.
Just a minute. I'm not that well versed with all these things.
Stop sharing option is there.
How do we go back? Show thumbnail.
Just go downside. The green sharing screen is there. Just remove from there.
Professor Sabiha, you can ask.
Yeah, please. You can ask him. Let me try what is.
Hello.
Sabiha ji, you're unmuted.
Yeah. Hello. Professor Paul, that was very nice to know that conflicts can be resolved.
Yes, please. I can hear you.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Please.
Yeah, it was very nice to know that people have now realized that to end conflict, interdisciplinary approach is extremely important. Like you cannot have one-dimensional approach to come to an end to end a conflict.
Yes.
Because I am a sociology teacher for n number of years in general education, and I am been particularly interested in studying the cultural aspect of any society. I tend to understand that to lead the conflict resolution or conflict to rest, people do not pay attention to linguistic, to the language aspect, because if they pay attention to language aspect, they would probably accept culture in a better way, and then probably the reduction of the conflicts would be automatically. For example, food habit, or the kind of dress that I wear, or for example, the faith that I have. I belonging to a particular faith. Probably in my faith, you cannot have idol worship, but I'll comment on somebody's faith who's having an idol worship. So I don't know whether there is some work being done on linguistic aspect or using language as a tool to reduce a conflict, especially the cultural one. I'm not talking about environmental and political and economic, but we have a lot of cultural conflict around the world. If you look at the globe, is there anybody doing such work, or is there any considerable work being done, sir? I would like to know about. Thank you.
As far as thank you so much, Professor, for understanding at least the relevance of interdisciplinary approach in understanding and and respecting each other in a multicultural society and setup. But as far as your question concerned, in linguistic interdisciplinary approach or use of linguistics in peace and conflict studies. Peace and conflict studies as a discipline is very new in nature, or in conflict resolution is very new in nature.
Okay.
So as far as in Indian context, I don't have much what is called understanding even, but there could be some European and American because they have almost completed around 100 years of peace and conflict studies in as a discipline as a research process, etc. So if there is something that come across, I will surely let you know, because Hemant Yadav, through Hemant Yadav, I can. But the fact that you have acknowledged or recognized that even the slants and the use of language or the appearance and the culture, etc., it's a very complex issue in India. For example, I can cite you one simple example. I sit in Gangtok, you understand? And this is a Himalayan range. I think half of the Indian doesn't know our Mongoloid fringe people are also part of India.
Of course, I agree.
You understand?
They call them Nepalis. They call them
not
Chinese.
only Nepalese, we call them Chinggis, we call them Chinese. It's a too much. It's certain times it is too much. You understand? And this is how we need to understand and recognize our biases.
Yes.
It's very important. So from south to north and east to west, we should promote and encourage and cherish the values of diversity. And that is what interdisciplinary almost what is called aiming to. You understand? So I think this is very important to recognize the diversity, recognize the cultural diversity, food habits, etc. So I think the point that we need to understand is this. Our limited understanding within a particular discipline, our limited understanding within our culture, etc., is being challenged when we hear about other perspectives, other disciplinary understandings, etc. You understand? For example, I will bring to you a simple one more, and then I will conclude. The sociological understanding of purity and impurity, because you are a professor in sociology. And today, how are we going to deal with this purity and impurity in the socio-cultural setup? Do they have any kind of relevance in the society from a scientific advanced understanding?
Yeah, they don't have. They don't have.
This is we have to understand it.
Yes.
You understand? The great process of procreation will stop if we don't understand and recognize either question of menstrual hygiene or periods, etc. But our very parochial understanding on these kind of things need to be challenged from scientific perspective. You understand? So that is where interdisciplinary get some kind of relevance in the contemporary context. So I think, Professor, this is what the limited understanding I have. It's you can respond.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Can we
We'll
request
keep in touch. We'll keep in touch.
to ask his question? We are running out of time.
Oh, yeah. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, Professor.
Dinesh, sir? Dr. Dinesh?
I think
Please
somebody else.
ask a question.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening.
Dr. Paul, hello.
Yeah, I can hear you.
My question is,
Yeah.
my question is very specific. Multidisciplinary by homogeneous community,
Yes.
or multidisciplinary by the heterogeneous community.
Yes.
What is your take on this? First, we introduce specialization. First, we introduce specialization, focused on so much on specialization.
Yes.
Now, the same people are believing, having monopoly over the knowledge. Now they think that it is still not up to the mark, so let's apply the multidisciplinary approach, but not allowing the people to enter into the den of the knowledge of the diverse people, right?
Yes.
Having monopoly over the knowledge by one homogeneous community or the elite, and applying the multidisciplinary approach to study the society. Why not people from diverse spectrum, let them come and study? That is my, in fact, it's a kind of comment.
This particular question.
You can say something.
Yeah, I completely agree with your point that you are trying to highlight. But let me first of all theoretically make a difference between interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary approaches. See, interdisciplinary approach is drawing insights from various disciplines to understand a particular problem. And then you come out with a holistic, what is called findings. Whereas multidisciplinary approach, you study a particular issue from your own disciplinary framework or different disciplines, and then your conclusions are different, not same. But regarding your question, we are in a multicultural society. Multicultural society which consists of stratifications, class, caste, etc. I think there is a necessary of going beyond the boundaries of all these stratifications. You understand? That is what interdisciplinary is trying to promote. But it is not that easy in a society like Indian society, which has practiced for almost 10,000 or 7,000 years such kind of stratification. No, this is very difficult. This is very difficult, as you said. I don't see any kind class and caste. You understand? See, even if you look at Charles Darwin's the evolution theory in terms of creation, we all are somehow connected together. But the problem here, what happens is that when in a segment of section or the society is deprived or denied, then and they have been perpetuated for it's not 1 or 2 years, thousands of years. You understand? There comes the question. And today we live in a kind of what is called a psyche where people think that it is my destiny. It's a very, very problematic understanding that has been created and nurtured in our mindset. So I think this is a small effort to break that kind of gratification that exists in our society on the basis of identity, culture, etc. This is my limited understanding. I think you can contribute to it further.